So we are going to be looking at Matthew chapter 2. Each of the Gospels has their own kind of emphasis or point of view or, emphasis concerning the Messiah. And Matthew is about the Messiah, the King. And it's interesting because the record of the Magi who come to worship the King of the Jews happens only in Matthew. And we're going to be going through that, and it's really got some just great, it's just a great record, and it's very inspiring when we understand some things about the star, about the Magi, and what happened, and the diligence that they had, and what they were willing to do to worship the King. So we'll get started here. Verse 1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem. And I have to move some things around my screen so that I can see it better. Okay. They arrived in Jerusalem. Now, first point is it was after Jesus was born. You know, we are so familiar with the traditional story this time of year, and we see the stable and the manger and the uh, uh, Joseph and Mary and the baby, and then the shepherds show up, and then the three wise men show up, and they're all there together. And that's really not the way it happened. The story is wonderful. It helps bring our attention and a lot of people's attention to the reality of Jesus was born. But God's perspective and God's story, as he tells it in the text, is a lot more interesting and accurate. And Jesus was already born when this happened. It was an event that occurred and is over, and now we're moving on, and this is more of the story of what happens. Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea. There were two Bethlehems in that area. I think the other one was in the area of Galilee. So just to be clear, it's the Bethlehem in Judea, which is south of Jerusalem, about 7 miles or so. And it happened in the days of Herod the king, and he was a nasty guy. He he was always looking out for his own interests, and if he ever got suspicion that anyone was trying to take over or remove his power or diminish him in any way, he went after them and he'd have them killed, and he didn't really care who they were. They could be friends, they could be relatives, his kids, they could be his wife, it could be anybody. He really didn't care. He just took care of it. He was brutal. And that's the king at that time. Well, behold, Magi from the east arrive in Jerusalem. And this is a big deal. The Magi they have a reputation. They come from far away from Jerusalem, and we'll look at that in the map here in a second. But they had expertise in astronomy and understanding and interpreting the events of the sky to what was going on the earth, on the world. And there was a lot of common belief about that. So they were skilled at that and often were asked to be advisors of kings and of rulers because they wanted to know what was going on. And if they could know someone who could tell them from the sky, then that was gave them an edge. And so they were very comfortable in amongst people of power and with rulers and so on. And they had a big reputation, but they weren't normally in Jerusalem. And here they come. They arrive in Jerusalem. Behold, here they are. What's going on? Um, and oh, by the way, it wasn't just three of them like the traditional story. It would have been a group, and we'll see why in a moment. But here they are. They arrive in Jerusalem. So where did they come from? Here's a map of the area. This is a map of first through third century of AD to kind of give us an idea. But that's pretty much the time of Christ. It's a little bit hard to read this map just simply because the water is all white. So all of this area is the Mediterranean. Normally that would be blue, but that's water. Here's Black Sea, up here is water, the Red Sea down here, and so on. So just to get your bearings, that's what we're going to look at. And we're going to drill in now on this area. There we go. So the Magi were over here I'm going to back up once. in the Parthian Empire. This is a big empire. This is the Roman Empire. The reddish brown is the Roman Empire. The green is the Parthian Empire. They're both big. They're both powerful. The Magi are over here in the Parthian Empire. So now we'll drill in here. And here is Israel. I put a blue star here about where Jerusalem is. You can see Gaza there. We're hearing a lot about Gaza these days. And you know what? They've been around for a long time in the Bible and different people there at different times, but it's always been a problem. There's just trouble from that particular area. But there's Jerusalem right next to the Dead Sea right here. Sea of Galilee's up here. So the Magi are all over here. And we don't know exactly where they came from, but somewhere over there. That's where they were. And could have been Babylon, could have been elsewhere. But these yellow lines that you see on the map are the primary trade routes at the time. Uh, People would have goods and goods basically that they would want to trade, for example. They want to go sell. Well, they had to go take them to market or, for a lot of reasons, people would travel. But when they traveled, it was a dangerous thing. There were a lot of people out there that wanted their stuff and they would sell. And I'm sure they were organized as well. It wasn't just individuals. I'm sure there were groups, marauders or whatnot. So safety in numbers. It kind of reminds me of the expansion in the West and the States where covered wagons, big trains of covered wagons were put together to migrate from, say, St. Louis or so on and head west. And it was safety in numbers, and they would be able to protect themselves and support each other and so on because they had a lot. Well, same thing here in this time. They recognized safety in numbers. And so they would put together caravans of people and animals that would travel together, camels, for example. And there could be 1,000 camels in these caravans. They could be really, really large. And, 1,000 wasn't the largest. They could get multiple thousands even. So it was a very big deal. It would be a lot to organize, I would think, too. So it would take some time to put something like that together. But then they would travel on these routes that were pretty well established. And if the Magi were leaving from Babylon, for example, they probably would have been on this one and circle up around, and then they would have come down into Israel. And there's some paths or some routes that aren't or are in addition to these big yellow ones. So they could have come down through here and come down the Jordan River Valley or one of the other ways to get to their destination of Jerusalem. But they traveled in a caravan. And this took some time. It's a long distance and it's by foot. And we know from Ezra, who made this journey from Babylon to go back to Jerusalem, we know it took him 4 months. It says in Ezra chapter 7, verse 9, for on the first day of the first month, he began to go up from Babylon. And on the first day of the 5th month, he arrived at Jerusalem, according to the good hand of his God on him. So that's 4 months. From the first day of the first month to the first day of the 5th month is 4 months. So that's a pretty long journey. And you think about that's a commitment. The Magi are well-to-do, they're well-respected, and I would think they really wouldn't have to go anywhere, but something had happened. They had seen something that so energized them, they wanted to go on this trip. And it's 4 months getting there, and it's got to be at least 4 months coming back, and you're going to spend some time where you're going. You'd plan for a year trip, I would think, and that would take some planning and some effort and commitment to do that. And I think that's wonderful to think that of the Magi who were not Jews. They were not Jews, they're Gentiles. So they come into Jerusalem, they arrive. Where is he who's been born of the kings? They've got some questions. Where is he? I can just see them. They're coming into the city, and here everyone's, oh, the Magi here. I wonder what's going on. And he says, hey, excuse me, could you tell me where he is? Who? Well, the one, he's been born, the king of the Jews recently been born. What? Could you tell me where he is? I need some directions. We want to pay homage to him. We want to bow down and worship him and give him our respects and his due. Because, we saw his star when it rose. And so they had questions and they wanted to know. And I wonder if they were surprised that no one seemed to know what was going on. And here they are in the capital in Jerusalem, where you would think people would be pretty excited about it, but they didn't seem to know what was going on. And they wanted help, but they saw his star when it rose and that prompted it. Well, you've probably heard John and others at times talk about or mention kind of in passing that we believe that the star that they saw was Jupiter, and I fully believe that as well. But I do want to say there's got to be more to the story than just being Jupiter, because this is Jupiter in the sky, and it's interesting. It's big. That's it right there in the middle, the brightest one that you see. You can look outside tonight in the States anyway, if you have a clear sky, and you can see Jupiter up there, and you'll see it as looks kind of like that. It happens a lot. Jupiter's in the sky a lot every year. So just it rising a particular day wouldn't have been that extraordinary. So what was it about that time and that sighting that really caught their attention? We're going to take a look at that. Um, we want to look at what God says about the stars to kind of get some background for this. In Genesis chapter 1, it says in verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. So there was purpose for this, to separate the day from the night, to let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and years. So days and years of the calendar, okay, useful for that, but also for signs and seasons. The word seasons really isn't talking about the kinds of seasons we typically think of, like spring and fall and winter, or rainy season, dry season, things like that. It's about appointed times, like the feast. The big feasts were appointed times, specific things, specific times, specific purpose. And they were for that as well. Also, for signs. And the point of the sign is not the sign itself. So we're driving along the road, we see a stop sign and it's big red sign. And we don't stop and say, "Oh, look at that sign. It's so wonderfully red. It's got great lettering on it. It has a geometric shape to it. What a great sign." No, the point of that sign is to stop. That's the point. And that's the point of the signs of the stars too. It points out something. It calls our attention to something of significance. And they are for that as well. And to give light on the earth. God made the two great lights, the great light to rule the day, which is the sun, the lesser light to rule the night, which is the moon, and he made the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day, over the night, to separate the light from darkness. God saw that it was good, and there was evening and morning, and there was morning a fourth day. I think it's kind of interesting, just as a side note, that by the end of the fourth day, the stars that gave light and did those things was in the heavens. And at the end of 4,000 years, Christ was born, who brought light to the earth and separated light from darkness for us. So I think this is kind of cool. Psalm 147, God counts the number of the stars. And there's a lot of them. And he calls them all by their names. He named the stars. He had man name animals. They were in the dominion of man at that time. So he named the animals, but the stars are in God's dominion. He named them. And just think about that. That's a lot of their names, a lot of names. Many of them have come forward and were known, certainly in Bible times, particularly. You know, those early years, call them early, the first 2,500 years or so, there was no written word at all. That didn't start till Moses. So that's about 2,500 years. So how did they remember things? How did they learn about God's story and his plans and all of that? It was a lot of this in the sky, and they knew a lot because of the names of the stars. And it had held a lot of content for them. Isaiah 40 says, lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these, who brings out their army by numbers. Talking about the stars, who brings out their army by number. And you know, when an army is deployed, it is with great thought and deliberation and purpose. It isn't just a random sprinkling of the army. It's with purpose and rows and ranks and applied to in a strategic way, in a purposeful way. And here we go. He brings out their army by number. He calls them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is lacking. Psalms chapter 19, Psalm 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God. The expanse shows the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech and night after night, they declare knowledge. Stars can't speak, so obviously figure speech, but it pours out information. There's information to be had, and it's presented because the stars are deployed in a way and they have names and they declare knowledge. There is no speech, there are no words, their voice is not heard, yet their measuring line has gone out through all the earth, their words to the end of the world. There's purpose in how those stars are arranged and how they're named so that people could know about God and his plans. So the question is, did the Magi know about this? And if so, how? Because they aren't Jews. They're Gentiles. They're very educated. They know a lot of things. I'm sure they knew of the Jews and they knew about things that were happening over there, I would imagine, because they were knowledgeable. But did they really know about this? And if so, how? Well, go back to our map here. And we talked about Ezra coming from Babylon, took him 4 months to get to Jerusalem. Well, why did he have to come back to Jerusalem? It's because Nebuchadnezzar attacked Jerusalem and Israel, Judah, and captured them and started bringing people from Jerusalem to Babylon. And in that first group, one of the people in that group was a youth really, by the name of Daniel. And Daniel, went to Babylon, and he was noted to be very intelligent. He was noted to be something special. They put him, helped get him educated, and then found out that he really was very special and unique. And this particularly became clear in Daniel chapter 2, where Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that troubled him greatly. He got all his advisors together and said, I want to know what this dream means. Well, tell us your dream. No, I'm not going to tell you my dream. You tell me your dream and then tell me what it means. And that way I'll know that you know what you're talking about. Well, no one could do that. But then Daniel steps forward, and God is working with Daniel and declares to Daniel what this dream is and what it means. And so Daniel gives Nebuchadnezzar the answer. And King's reaction, the Nebuchadnezzar's reaction to that in verse 47 of chapter 2, the king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you have been able to reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel great and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the world, over the whole province of Babylon, and chief governor over all the wise men of Babylon. The wise men of Babylon included the Magi, and now he is governor. He's the leader of that group. In chapter 5, later on, down the road historically, another situation happens where the acting king has a party, a pagan party, and starts using the vessels of the temple that have been captured and brought to Babylon. And they're having their party, and all of a sudden there's a hand appears writing on the wall some words that they don't understand, and it really shook them up naturally. And there was a lot of commotion. And we pick it up in verse 10. It says, now because of the words of the kings and the lords, they're discussing this and they're all shook up about it. The queen came into the banquet house, and the queen spoke and said, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts alarm you or let your face be pale. There's a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king your father, made him master of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. And within that group is the Magi, because an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, explaining riddles, solving of difficult problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So, do you suppose Daniel taught the Magi anything when he was leading them? I imagine you did. I imagine he gave them a lot of information and a lot of insight about the stars and the heavens and how to read that. And that was, roughly 600 BC, a little bit nearer than that, but around then. And a lot to learn. And what I think about is if that's indeed what happened, let's think about how diligent and disciplined that group, the Magi's, generation after generation after generation, passing that knowledge down. Enough of that knowledge surviving for centuries to get to the point when the time came, they recognized what was happening in the sky. That's just thrilling to me. Well, here we have Jupiter. There's got to be more to the story, and there is. In the sky, God has organized the armies of the stars. They're put out in place in specific ways with names and so on and so forth, and they mean different things. This is the constellation of Leo. There are 12 constellations. Today, they're called the signs of the zodiac, which is a perversion of what they were originally by God, but there's 12 of them, 12 primary constellations. It takes a whole year to cycle all the way through all 12 of them. But here's one. This is Leo. And when you look in the sky, you're not going to see the lines that connect the dots. And oh, by the way, those stars aren't going to actually show up quite as bright as what they are in this picture. They're kind of emphasized, I think, so we can see them better. But the thing about constellations, there's a figure that's associated with them, like in this case, a lion. So you'll see a drawing like this that has a lion that surrounds those stars. And I think everyone I've ever met in my life that when we've talked about constellations, myself included, we'd look at the sky and we'd say, I don't see a lion. I see stars, but I don't see how in the world anyone could get a lion out of that. It takes a bigger imagination than mine to see a lion there. But that wasn't really the point of how they were used. The idea was when you trained yourself to recognize that collection, that configuration of stars, so you say, oh, that's Leo, then it comes to mind the lion, and then the content of the message about that constellation comes to your mind because you remember it's a lion. It's Leo, it's Judah. That's Judah, the tribe of Judah, where the king comes from, the Messiah. So here we see a picture of it the way an artist would do it. Uh, I'll point out there's the star Regulus here, and that is the king star. That's the star, the Messiah star. It has special significance that was well known through all cultures that that was a special star associated with king. And there it is in Judah, which is where the Messiah comes from. This is from Bollinger's work, and it's a more elaborate picture of the lion, and you see the star there, Regulus, so that's another way of looking at it. But these constellations are important in telling the story. For me, the easiest way to think about this, it's kind of like, in some ways, it's like reading. There's a lot to learn to be able to read. You got to understand the language. You got to understand, recognize symbols, how they're put together as letters into words, words into sentences, how to pronounce definitions, all kinds of things go into learning to read. When it comes to the sky, all of that's, a lot of that at least, is there. but also how it plays out kind of in slow motion. It's like a play. You go to a theater. Theater has a stage. The stage is where the story is going to be told. And when the story is told, it happens in different locations in different ways. So part of it maybe is in a house, maybe part of it's outside. So a set is put on the stage of a house, or a set is put on the stage for being outside, so that you have a context and you understand what's going to happen in that story in the context of the setting. And now you've got actors that enter. One comes in from one side, another actor comes in from the other side, and they start interacting. Maybe at first they're distant, but they get closer together. Maybe it's verbal, maybe it's physical, lots of ways of interaction. The closer they get, the more intense it gets, and the story develops in the context of the setting, and you understand it. The story is told. That's kind of how the sky works, the heavens. The settings, the stage is the heavens. The settings are the constellations. They provide the context of what happens within them. The actors are the traveling stars, as the ancients called them. We know them as planets. Because they noticed all the stars move very slowly. It takes a year to go, all the way around. But there's some stars that move a lot faster than that. And they kind of pop up in different places and they move. You can see them going together. Sometimes they're separate, a lot of times, but then sometimes they come close together and there's significance. They put there's significance to where they come together, how close they come together, the fact they come together, those kinds of things. And when you know all the ingredients of this, which is a lot, it tells a story. And some things happened in the sky in 3 BC and 2 BC that put together tell a story that's fascinating when it comes to the Bible. So, for example, there is a period in 3 BC where Jupiter rises, comes up in the dawn, which makes his entrance onto the stage, into the set, with Venus. Jupiter is the God star, the Messiah star. Venus is the mother star or planet. And they came in kind of together. And at the same time, the sun, which represents God, and the moon, which is the mother, and Mercury, which is the messenger, they're all together in the constellation of Leo, which is Judah. So you put all that together and you say, well, that kind of looks like something big, maybe a king in Judah. That's, you could put that together. That's just one example. There's quite a few things that happened during that period of time that are just fascinating. And that's as far as I can go into that because that is a long teaching to go through all of that, which has happened. But I wanted to give you an idea about that because that's what they were seeing and putting together, putting the puzzle together. Here's an example of a conjunction. This is Venus right here and that's Jupiter right there. And they're really close together. So that would have significance to them, depending where it was. Now, there was a point in time where Jupiter, in 2 BC, where Jupiter and Venus became so close together in the western sky that it merged together and looked like one star. And when you put Venus on top of Jupiter, it would look kind of like this because Venus will look bigger. So it really would be bright in the sky, very noticeable. It is possible that the Magi saw that at the end of this sequence or near the end of this sequence of events in the sky, that they're pretty convinced we're talking about King and Judah. And then they see this thing, and you know what? Directionally, if they're in the area that I showed you on the map, directionally, this would have been right over Judah or Judea. And maybe that's what triggered them. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it's interesting to see these things. And it had to be something like that. Perhaps this sequence of events that triggered them to know, hey, based on all this knowledge that we've received, passed down through the years, we understand something big is happening in Judah. The king has arrived. And isn't that wonderful? That's what Daniel talked about centuries ago, that the Messiah was coming. Here it is. We got to go. I can just imagine those conversations. Well, here they are. This is the background of it. And now, when Herod the king heard this, he was deeply troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. There's quite a hubbub going on. Jerusalem's probably interested because you're the Messiah. Really? You think the Messiah is here? Herod's kind of interested because this sounds like a threat. And we know what he does about threats. But where? So, gathering together all the high priests, experts in the law from among the people, he inquired of them where the Christ would be born. And they knew the answer. They said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, because this is what has been written by the prophet in Micah. And you, brethren, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the leaders of Judah, for out of you will come a leader who will shepherd my people Israel. This is clearly the Messiah that is talking about, and is clearly Bethlehem in the land of Judah. It's just down the road, 7 miles. That's where it happens. Okay. So next step, Herod secretly calls the Magi. He doesn't want anyone else to know what's up here. And he finds out from them the time when the star appeared. And this appeared, this word is present tense. It's something that continued over a period of time. So it wasn't just the star first appearing, it was all those events associated with it that we just talked about a little bit. But when did it start? When did it start to happen? That's what he wanted to know, because he wanted to know how old could this child be? And so they told him. And he sent them then, when he got the answer, sent them to Bethlehem, and he said, go and search diligently for the child. And as soon as you find him, report back to me so that I can come and pay homage to him as well. Yeah, right. He had ulterior motives, and we know that. The word child, by the way, is not the word that would be used for a baby. It would be for more like a toddler, someone that was a child that was older than an infant or a baby. This is a map of Israel, and right there is Jerusalem with the arrow, and right below it, just south of it, is Bethlehem. So about 7 miles away, and that's where they're going. So it's pretty close. And so, verse 9, after listening to the king, they went on their way. The Magi went on their way. Now, they wouldn't have gone right out of the meeting and hopped on the camels and headed south. No, it would have taken more planning. Remember, I think I've said there's more than three of them. Was there 10 of them? Was there 20 of them? Was there, more than three? There had to be because they're traveling in a group. And I don't think the whole caravan would have been with them this whole time. So now perhaps they're on their own, more or less. And they had a group. They would have come together as a group. Probably a lot more wanted to come with them, but not everyone could go, I'm sure. But a group. So they had to get ready. They're on this long journey. They've got a long journey back. So they got to organize themselves. They get out of the meeting with Herod. They go back to their place. They get all organized, ready to go. And in the morning, in the wee hours before sunrise, typically, is when people would leave because they would like to travel in the cool part of the day and not the heat of the day later on. So they typically would leave before the sun would rise. And they're traveling, and look, the star that they had seen when it rose, which would be Jupiter, was going ahead of them until it came and stood over where the child was. When the planet rises, it gets to a place in its path that it looks like it stops. To people on the earth, it looks like it stopped. It's really not, but that's what the appearance is. And just kind of parks for a little while. And they saw that, and it just, when they looked, there it was. It's exactly in the direction that they're headed towards Jerusalem. And you think about that, there's probably been times in your life when you felt like you knew what God wanted you to do, something specific, but you weren't, boy, maybe you weren't quite sure about it, but boy, I'm going to go ahead and pursue it, and we're going to see where this goes. It's an open door. I'm going to go down and see what happens. And then there's confirmation. It's the right thing. And when that confirmation comes, it is thrilling. It is so exciting. And you think about these guys, they saw in the sky hundreds of miles away events in the sky that were consistent with what was told them there generations ago, centuries ago. And there it is over a period of time, they're watching this happen. Boy, they're pretty sure, well, let's go and go worship. And let's go recognize and give the due reverence to the king. And they go and they make this long journey and they get to Jerusalem and nobody knows what they're talking about. And then it develops and now they find out where he is. And boy, are we right about this? Are we right about this? And they look up and there's the star right in front of them. All they got to do is continue on the path. And what a great thing that was. The star they had seen going ahead of them stood over where the child was, means it was right in line directionally where they're going. And seeing the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. With boy, I can just imagine that, how exciting that would have been for them. We're right. We're going to see the king. We're going to see the Messiah. How great, the king of the Jews. And when they came into the house, not a stable, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling down to their knees, they paid homage to him. They worshiped him. They bowed to him. They went down and paid him respects. And after opening their treasure boxes, they presented gifts to him, gold and frankincense and myrrh. So boxes, they're traveling on a caravan, and the reason you're in a caravan is because you're concerned that there are bandits out there that will steal things that are of value. So you're not going to be carrying around a pirate's treasure chest of stuff. And, let's not be obvious here. So it would have been secure and discreet. Um, Treasure box or, whatever that was, a container that they could carry on their person and not be obvious that they had something of great value with them. And let's say there were a dozen of them, not three, but a dozen. I bet that none of them came empty-handed. What do you think? If you were so excited about all this happening and you went to the effort and you went on a 400-mile journey over 4 months, whatever it was, I think it's 400 miles, but it's certainly 4 months, and when all that, would you come empty-handed to the king? Would you be the one that say, "Ah, oh, gee, forgot my gift, but I'm still worshiping"? Now, I bet they all had a gift, and they started piling up gold and frankincense and myrrh, and there you got. And they are all gifts of value. Frankincense and myrrh being essentially perfume, which was really desirable in that time because it stunk. Um, there was no public sanitation, so to speak. It's just a lot of animal and human waste all over the place. Now, people didn't bathe like we do today. They didn't do the laundry like we do today. There's carcasses of dead animals around, and they're stinking. It's a stinky place. So if you had something that kind of lightened the load on that, that would be good. And frankincense and myrrh did that. And since it was so desirable, it was also something that could be sold for, money. And gold obviously is wealth also. So that brought some wealth, some much needed wealth to Joseph and Mary and the family for what was about to happen here. And that was really important because they didn't have it before then. And having been instructed by God, the Magi, having been instructed by God in a dream not to return to Herod, and this phrase, having been instructed by God, it's the kind of phrase that means, yes, God instructed them, but it was because they asked him. They went to God. So they knew what Herod had asked them to do. Herod wanted them to come back. They know what he's up to, so they don't want to go back. But how are we going to handle this? How can we get past him? How can we ignore him? What should we do? They ask God. They're Gentiles. They ask God, and God answers them, and he says, don't go back. And so they return to their country by a different route, different road. And here's the map again. If we look at Jerusalem right there where the star is, they came down from the north to arrive. Well, now let's go on a different path. They could just drop down here a ways, pick up this, go along this major trade route, and Herod had no idea where they were. And once he got past the border of the Roman Empire, they're out of touch, out of his reach anyway. And then by the time they get up into this area, they can circle back around and go home. So don't know for sure that's exactly the path they took, but that's kind of the idea, I'm sure. And so now, after they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, because Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. Then he got up, took the child, his mother, during the night, departed for Egypt. He hightailed it out of there and stayed there until the death of Herod, with the result that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet was fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he realized that he'd been tricked by the Magi, became furious. And having sent orders, he killed all the male children that were in Bethlehem and all its surrounding region from 2 years old and under. Well, why 2 years old? Based on the timing that he had found out from the Magi. So when he asked about when they saw the star rise, and they told him the timing, that's what he bases this on, and it's from 2 years old and under. So we know Jesus was a toddler. Then, when what was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, A sound was heard in Ramah, sobbing and great mourning. Rachel was crying for her children, and she did not want to be comforted because they are no more. Rachel died in birth, giving birth to Benjamin. She was buried around Bethlehem and was known to be associated with Bethlehem. So that's why Rachel was there, crying for her children because they are no more. Now, after Herod had died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Get up, take the child, his mother, go into the land of Israel, because those who were seeking to take the child's life have died. Then he got up and took the child and his mother and went into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Instead, after being instructed by God in a dream, he departed into the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a city called Nazareth. So that was spoken through the prophets was fulfilled, that he will be called a Nazarene. And so that is the record of Matthew 2. And I just find that so inspiring. When we think about who they were, who the Magi were, the Gentiles, God sent an angel to tell Zacharias about John the Baptist. He sent an angel to Mary to announce and talk about what was going to happen for her. He sent an angel and angels to the shepherds in the field, making those announcements. But to the Gentiles, the announcement came through the stars, instructed by Daniel, generations and centuries before. And that's just crazy. That's just magnificent what God did. And he set it all up back in Genesis to have all of that there to educate and to indicate and to alert people. And all of that could happen. And the wealth that they brought, the utility of the gifts that supported them in their flight to Egypt. It's just a wonderful story. And I think we can take things away from that. They were diligent, they were disciplined with their study, with their observance. And I think we can do that and approach the written word that way. We are so blessed to live in a time that the entire Bible's been written. Even Paul didn't have that, but we have that. And we have great knowledge available to us. There's great research all the time going on within this ministry to help us understand. And we can be diligent and put forth that kind of effort and reap great understanding and see great things happen too, just like they did. I find it inspiring, and I hope you do as well. It's a wonderful time of year.